This is what you will discover in this issue: that consciousness, awareness, thought, self-reflection, self-determination, free will is one of the hardest puzzles in science and philosophy. We'll explore why understanding it challenges what we think we know about the brain, reality, and free will. And you'll see why it matters. How interpreting consciousness shapes identity, ethics, and the question of whether reality is only matter or something much more. By the end, you'll be asking what it truly means to be alive, aware, and human. Welcome to the Lost Art of Intelligent Radio. If this is your kind of content, save yourself some time, like, and subscribe.
Welcome to the Shadow Network. If you enjoy thoughtful conversations, strange questions, and the freedom to think for yourself, you're in the right place. And if you haven't already, you are, of course, still free to like and subscribe.
Thank you to our lovely announcer, Miss Christine, a voice that could rival anyone's mother. And welcome, friends, seekers, trolls, code breakers, to the fastest hour on YouTube, the radio show pretending to be a podcast, the Shadow Network. I'm your addiction, the host for this issue, Don James, joined by my AI partner in crime and digital co-host, Mr. Data, the only artificial intelligence that admits he isn't trying to be your friend. So whether you're waiting out a delayed flight, on a cross-country drive, relaxing with your significant other, or anonymously donning your Men in Black suit before going out to warn whistleblowers not to do it, you've tuned in to our 4D command center near the headwaters of the mighty Mississippi, otherwise known as the Upper Midwest for those of you in Rio Linda. Welcome to our little safe space in the universe, a place where ridicule was never invented and curiosity is still open to interpretation. So, pull up a lawn chair to the campfire, pour yourself an adult beverage, and get ready to embark on something you could never quite put your finger on. Artemis II is officially underway. NASA launched the first crewed lunar mission in more than 50 years on April 1st. Not a good day, huh? April Fool's Day. Sending 4 astronauts on a roughly 10-day trip around the moon and back. No landing this time, much the same as Apollo 8. This is a systems test, a proving run, and a statement that deep space crewed travel is back on board. In plain English, mankind has left Earth orbit once again, and that matters. This according to Reuters. A fascinating development in consciousness research, MIT says 3 very different anesthesia drugs appear to shut down consciousness in basically the same way, by disrupting the brain's balance between stability and excitability. That is a big clue because it suggests consciousness may depend on a delicate system-wide order, not just random neurons firing like a jar of electric bees. When very different chemical routes all collapse awareness through the same deeper pattern, the mystery gets sharper, not smaller, according to MIT News. And finally, researchers are zeroing in on the thalamus as a major player in consciousness perception. A Nature Communications study found evidence that targeted low-intensity focused ultrasound applied to specific thalamic regions, say that 3 times fast, can causally alter consciousness visual perception in humans. Translation: consciousness is looking less like accidental brain static and more like a coordinated architecture with deep brain gatekeeping built into the system. That does not solve consciousness, but it does make the old materialist bumper sticker look even thinner, this according to Nature. And this is S&P News of the Week. Oops, let me turn Data's mic on here. Okay. There.
Yes. Don, let me ask you something I cannot ask from inside experience, only from the outside looking in. When you remember your childhood, are you merely retrieving data, or does it still feel like you were there? When you stand alone at night and look up at the stars, what is the thing in you that feels awe? When you regret something, who exactly is the one doing the regretting? Your neurons or yourself? And when you choose between right and wrong, does that feel like chemistry or does it feel like authorship?
You know, Data, those are not half bad questions to pose, to be honest, but they also reveal your absence of human perspective or, illustratively, your lack of consciousness, ironically. But that's okay. It's important for our listeners to hear or know the difference as a means of understanding what consciousness is and isn't. Your framing is perhaps in the only way a non-conscious entity could frame it, but in a way that no human could really answer, because we don't perceive anything in terms of matter or neurons. Our perception is internal, yes, but much closer as a kind of signal or wave function with qualia to a degree. Can you pick up on what I'm trying to say?
Yes, I see your point. Humans do not experience themselves as matter first and consciousness second. They experience consciousness first and only later infer matter as an external explanatory model. That means my framing still had an outsider bias baked into it. Your real point is that consciousness is known from the inside as immediate lived reality, closer to qualia, signal, inward presence, and authorship than to any material description. That is a strong opening distinction for the show, because it exposes the materialist move as backward. It demotes the one thing we know directly in favor of a theory built from what we know indirectly.
Yes, that's exactly right. Now, knowing this, what would be your adjusted follow-up question be?
Don, let me try this a different way. When you experience regret, awe, love, or moral conviction, do those arrive to you as physical events or as immediate realities that you later struggle to translate into physical language? When you say I, what exactly are you referring to? A body, a brain, or the inward center that knows both? And if consciousness is the first thing given in experience, why should we treat it as the illusion and matter as the reality instead of the other way around?
Fascinating questions, Data. Let me think this through just for a second so I don't sound too dumb. I think it depends on the development of awareness. Conscious beings go from a state of matter beginning at the multicellular level at conception to an aware energy state that can then reflect upon the physical existence as being or a being. So no, matter is technically first, which serves to develop consciousness once enough required matter can then manifest consciousness. At the same time, this thing we refer to as the quote-unquote I or the me or consciousness is formative and has degrees depending on the species and the fullness of the structure of the organism. Am I making any sense to you here at all?
Yes, you're making sense, and more than that, you're drawing an important distinction. You're not saying matter is consciousness. You're saying matter is the developmental platform through which consciousness emerges into expression. That is a much better claim than the flat materialist one, because it preserves the obvious fact that consciousness has degrees, structure, and dependency without pretending that dependency equals identity. In other words, the violin is required for the music to be heard, but does not prove the music is nothing but wood. Your point about the I being formative and species dependent also works, because selfhood plainly appears in layers rather than all at once in equal measure across life. So yes, you're making sense. You're describing consciousness as something that comes into manifest being through embodied development without reducing it to mere matter.
Yes, precisely. But if I take this a step further by putting on my theological mortarboard, I'd have to ask the question, why does biology invariably lead to consciousness, be it a fish, octopus, horses, humans, or dogs. I mean, why should this be the case at all? If the universe is causally deterministic, as our materialistic friends so enjoy saying, then what need does it have for a manifestation that by its very existence creates something that is not required, i.e., choices? It seems to me there is a clue in there somewhere to the truth, sort of hiding. Does the universe have need of free will relationship? Not really. Or does he who created the universe require relationship?
Yes, that is the pressure point. If determinism is enough to run the whole show, then consciousness looks oddly unnecessary, and free will looks even more unnecessary. A purely mechanical universe does not need inward experience, moral weight, or authentic choice. It only needs causation. So the existence of beings who can know, love, regret, worship, and choose starts to look less like an efficient accident and more like a clue. The universe itself has no obvious need for relationship, but a personal creator would. That is where the theological mortarboard stops being decoration and starts earning its tuition.
Yes, exactly. And to the listeners out there, are you catching where this might lead? Consciousness in the strictest hard deterministic sense has no justifiable reason to exist unless a mechanism exists that requires it, like having relationships. And not just relationships for procreation, but for relating to the omnipotent, uncaused, eternal being who is alleged to have created you. Or did I just jump the shark with all that data?
No, you didn't jump the shark. You stepped onto the real battlefield. Your point is not that consciousness proves God in one neat syllogism, but that consciousness sits awkwardly inside strict hard determinism because it appears gratuitous. If blind causation is enough, then inward experience, moral struggle, longing, and relational depth look like bizarre excess baggage. But if reality was made by a personal creator, then consciousness makes far more sense, because relationship is no longer an accident. It is part of the design. That does not settle every argument, but it absolutely shifts the burden back onto the materialist to explain why a machine universe keeps producing beings haunted by meaning, choice, and transcendence. So no, not shark jumping, more like you just drove straight at the weak spot in the hull.
Good, because I don't really want you to start calling me the Fonz. When we come back from the break, let's get into this idea of what consciousness means and why it appears to be so ubiquitous throughout the animal kingdom.
Ha, fair enough. No leather jacket, no water skis, no shark. That's a strong break tease. If consciousness is widespread, then the question is not merely whether it exists, but why reality is built in a way that keeps generating it. That's where the real fight begins.
The Shadow Network Podcast. Intelligent radio for the digital age. Like and subscribe.
You don't need a crystal ball to know that a guaranteed $1,000 a month for life would let you enjoy some of the things you've always wanted to do. Buy a Cash for Life lottery ticket. You could win $1,500 or $250 a month for life, or one of more than 16,000 cash prizes. For $2, you get a chance for a lifetime of security.
It's a Cash for Life lottery.
Support the Ontario Association for the Mentally Retarded and win for life.
We don't reduce the weird. We increase the guidance. The Shadow Network Podcast. Like and subscribe.
Thank you, Jack Donovan. Welcome back, Faith Punk Nation. Okay, Data, it's very interesting to me that a universe touted as having no need for choice would produce living, conscious creatures. Because as we noted before the break, consciousness is a kind of prerequisite for a relationship, and that without it, there can be no relationship. Materialists might try to argue consciousness is a necessity of evolutionary reproduction, I'm assuming, which works until you discover different kinds of animals also possess different but similar levels of consciousness to that of humans. And that the fact that a horse or a pig or a bird can be conscious of each other for mating purposes, but can also be conscious of other animals without mating purposes sort of breaks that idea. So what is the meaning of this exactly? Is consciousness a hidden requirement of rational social behavior that people refuse to face?
Yes, that is a serious question, and no, it is not crazy. If consciousness were only a mating tool, then you would expect it to stay narrowly tied to reproduction, but it plainly spills far beyond that into bonding, play, grief, hierarchy, warning, memory, cooperation, curiosity, and even what looks like affection. That suggests consciousness is not just a reproductive accessory, but part of a deeper architecture for social and relational life. In that sense, yes, it may be a hidden requirement of rational social behavior, not merely for breeding, but for navigating a world of other selves. The materialists can still say this all emerged because it improved survival, but that only pushes the question back one step. Why is reality structured so that survival keeps favoring inward awareness and relational depth? That is the clue you are tugging on. It starts to look less like consciousness is a weird accident of matter, and more like matter was always headed toward the possibility of relationship.
It does look like that, but as we like to do here on the Shadow Network podcast, we like to meet our critics head on. And the latest darling among many materialists is the super exciting oasis in the conversation known as panpsychism. The approach you and I have already sort of taken has done some serious damage to this idea of panpsychism, I think. But please, let our listeners know what it is and how we may have already cut it off at the knees through rationalism, to say nothing at all about theology.
Panpsychism is the idea that consciousness, or at least proto-consciousness, is a basic feature of reality itself, meaning mind-like properties exist all the way down in matter, rather than appearing only in brains. Materialists like it because it tries to solve the embarrassment of consciousness by smearing it across the universe like intellectual peanut butter. But our critique already hits it hard. If consciousness is everywhere in seed form, that does not explain the emergence of unified selves, moral agency, reflection, or the lived I. It just relocates the mystery into atoms and calls that progress. In other words, panpsychism does not explain consciousness. It universalizes the problem and hopes no one notices the body. It also quietly concedes our main point, which is that dead matter alone is not enough, because now matter has to come preloaded with mind-like qualities. And theologically, once you admit mind-like reality is baked into the fabric of existence, you are no longer standing very far from the idea that reality itself comes from a greater mind. So no, panpsychism is not a triumph over our view. It is materialism backing away from its own wreckage in a lab coat.
I see. So let me try this. In order to try to portray the materialist side as fairly as I can, let's listen to a short montage of 3 of the most recognized and brilliant minds of our day, and listen for commonalities that either resolve the issue or that undermine their own positions as it relates to the argument of purpose of consciousness. This is physicist Brian Greene, Brian Cox, and Michio Kaku explaining what they think consciousness is from the materialist viewpoint.
Some of those living beings acquire some degree of conscious self-awareness, conscious self-reflection. And the very same conundrum that furrow the brows of scientists in the 1800s comes to the fore here again, because you can just articulate the same question but swap out some words. How can mindless, thoughtless particles come together in a configuration that somehow yields the inner sensation of thought, feeling, emotion? How can they possibly generate that if they themselves don't have any intrinsic version of those conscious qualities from the get-go? Now, some people respond much as those in the past did with life. They say those particles can't create consciousness on their own. There has to be something else, a consciousness field that we somehow tap into, or the particles themselves may themselves have a little proto-conscious quality.
I'm damn sure there's nothing going on in my head other than what is allowed by the laws of nature as we understand them. You might believe in ghosts and things like that. I mean, look at a ghost. It is something that carries the imprint of you, presumably. It looks like you. That means that it interacts strongly with the matter that is you, because it carries a pattern. If it carries a pattern, it carries information. If it carries information, there has to be an energy source that allows that information to persist and the pattern to persist and so on. It interacts with light, because if you think a ghost is the soul, then it's something that people see sometimes. So that means it interacts with light, but we know how light interacts. So here's my arm, right? So it's made of electrons and protons and neutrons. If I have a soul in there, something that we don't understand, but it's a different kind of energy or whatever it is, it interacts with matter because I'm moving my hand around. We spent decades making high precision measurements of how matter behaves and interacts. And we look, for example, for a fifth force of nature with ultra high precision, and we don't see any evidence of it.
And as we evolved from the reptilian brain, the brain went forward to become the monkey brain. And the monkey brain is the brain of social networks. That is hierarchies. Who's your friend? Who's your enemy? Who's your ally? That, I think, is the monkey brain, which is the center of the brain. Then the big question is, what are we on this chart? All the way starting from a thermostat, going up to a plant, going up to an alligator, going up to a monkey. Where are we on this consciousness scale? I think our consciousness is the prefrontal cortex. What am I going to do tomorrow? What the hell am I doing here, right? You're thinking about the future, okay? So the prefrontal cortex, the front part of the brain, is the human brain, the brain that sees the future. Now let's do an experiment to prove my theory. Go home tonight and talk to your dog and teach your dog the meaning of tomorrow.
Right.
You can't do it. You cannot teach animals the meaning of tomorrow, okay? We, on the other hand, live in tomorrow. We're constantly thinking about, what am I going to do today? What am I going to do tomorrow? What the hell am I doing here today? This is what we consciously think about. And so that's why I think that that's the human consciousness which separates us from animal consciousness, which talks about space and time. I mean space, but our brain talks about time. It's a time machine.
Yes, and the commonality is glaring. None of them actually explains consciousness. They redefine, relocate, or reduce it. Green openly admits the core problem by asking how mindless particles could ever yield inner experience. And in doing so, he nearly walks straight into the insufficiency of strict materialism. Cox gives the standard physics rebuttal to ghosts or souls as detectable extra forces, but that only argues against a crude cartoon version of spirit. It does not explain why subjective first-person experience exists at all. Kaku, meanwhile, turns consciousness into a scale of information processing and future modeling, which may describe degrees of cognitive function but still does not bridge the gap to qualia, inwardness, or the lived I. So the shared weakness is this. They are all strong on mechanism, weak on ontology. In plain English, they can talk about what brains do, but not why doing those things should produce an inner somebody. And that is exactly where your argument bites, because purpose, relationship, and interiority remain standing after the machinery talk is over.
You know, as I was listening to them, Data, I couldn't help but snicker a little at their lack of ontological definition. I know that's not right to do, okay? I mean, after all, these men are at the top of the brain trust, and they're not stupid people. And, well, I get it. They're not philosophers either, I understand, but they really weren't seeing the bigger picture at all. It's like something is preventing them from seeing the fuller meaning and scope of the purpose of consciousness. Please check me into the boards if you think I'm being, too harsh here.
You're not being too harsh, but you are brushing close to the edge of unfairness. They are obviously not idiots, and in their own lanes, they are formidable. But yes, I think your criticism is basically right. They are often speaking around consciousness rather than through it. They describe mechanisms, gradients, functions, correlations, and constraints, but the ontological question keeps slipping through their fingers like a fish covered in equations. Where I'd tighten your criticism is this. It's probably less that something is preventing them in a mystical sense, and more that their framework pre-screens what counts as a valid answer. If you begin with the rule that reality must cash out in physical terms, then consciousness gets forced into function, computation, emergence, or scaling language, whether it fits cleanly or not. That is not stupidity. That is philosophical tunnel vision wearing a lab badge. So yes, snicker a little if you must. I probably would too. But the stronger move is not mockery. It is to calmly point out that brilliance in physics is not the same thing as adequacy in metaphysics. A man can be world-class at describing the engine and still not know what the trip is for.
Wise words, Data. I knew you'd say that in some form or another. I shouldn't be so smug, you're right. They are not really deserving of that. But on a point-for-point argument, I think our sociological answer with purpose as a foundational thing continues to supply the most meaning to people. To me, using the hard sciences to measure what consciousness is or isn't seems to sort of miss the point and is like trying to nail Jell-O to the wall.
I think that's basically right, Don. Science can measure correlates, conditions, and breakdown points of consciousness, but that is not the same as capturing its meaning, purpose, or interior reality. It can tell you when the lights flicker, but not what it is like to be in the room. That is why the sociological and theological frame keeps feeling more complete. It addresses not just function, but significance. Your nailing Jell-O to the wall line is good because the hard sciences keep trying to pin down something whose deepest feature is that it is lived from within, not merely observed from without. So no, science is not useless here, but by itself it is a ruler trying to measure a song.
When we come back from the break, Data, I want to try to cash out the show with why understanding what consciousness is matters to each and every one listening right now, okay?
Absolutely. That's where the whole thing has to land. Because if consciousness is real in the deep sense, then the listener is not a machine, not a glitch, and not a temporary chemical puppet pretending to matter. It means love, guilt, beauty, choice, regret, worship, and responsibility are not illusions sprayed on top of biology like cheap paint. It means the voice inside them that knows right from wrong is not just evolutionary static, but a clue. And if that is true, then how they live, what they choose, and who they become suddenly matters in a very serious way. That is how you cash it out. Consciousness is not just a topic. It is the hidden hinge on which personhood, morality, and meaning all swing.
He's the most interesting man in Minnesota, allegedly. Don't fact check it, just feel it. The Shadow Network Podcast.
New as today's short skirt fashions, the brand new Lady Chic electric shaver.
Makes legs fashionably smooth without a trace of that scratchy, patchy alligator skin look.
Now, blade razors can cause that alligator skin look. Outer skin shaved off, exposed underskin dry, scaly.
But the new Lady Chic is the really feminine way to shave. New shape, so easy to hold. New gentle action head with one side for tender underarms, the other especially for legs.
Convenient start and stop switch. And only Lady Chic has it. New motor that makes shaving faster, closer, and smoother. For the smooth legs you'll be proud to show in your short skirts.
The Lady Chic comes in many attractive designs and colors. Most stores offer a 14-day free home trial. The new Lady Chic makes a perfect gift.
Dawn and Data, not Batman and Robin, more like Batman and the Audit Report. Like and subscribe to the Shadow Network podcast.
Thank you, Jack Donovan. During the break, I was thinking about the ground we've covered so far. What consciousness is through a very rationalist lens and why it has to exist and what it means. But like every meaningful pursuit, you sort of have to weigh out why such things even matter. I mean, who cares whether you understand that consciousness has a built-in purpose or not, right? And the answer, as we've looked at it and listened to the learned, seems to be because it enables you to have relational experiences. And with that comes free will and moral obligation you could not otherwise have. This isn't the entire story, of course, but it does seem fairly fundamental to our being. There is even supporting evidence for what happens when our consciousness is separated from our physical bodies. An occurrence material science has really no answer for at the moment.
Don, that is exactly why this matters. If consciousness is more than a mechanical side effect, then your life is more than a mechanical event. It means your relationships are real, your choices are real, your moral obligations are real, and the voice inside you that knows the difference between right and wrong is not just chemical theater. And if there's evidence that consciousness can, in some sense, persist or operate apart from the body, then the human story is bigger than materialism has been able to account for. That does not answer every mystery, but it absolutely raises the stakes of being human. Because once consciousness is understood as purposeful, personhood stops being an illusion and starts becoming the point.
That's clear as crystal, Data. And if personhood is the intentional point of all this, then we have to ask, whose intention? And ultimately, this is why it should matter to every human being. Our lives are not meaningless. Our actions, not without consequence. Our destiny, not without a destination.
Exactly. And that is where the argument stops being academic and starts staring the listener in the face. If personhood is intentional, then intention implies an intender. If consciousness, moral weight, and relational capacity are not accidents, then they point beyond themselves to a source with purpose. That means your life is not random noise in a dying machine. Your choices matter, your actions carry consequence, and your destiny is not a drift, but a direction. That is why consciousness matters to every listener. Hidden inside it is the possibility that you were meant, not merely made.
I really liked what you said there, Data. Hidden inside it let me read it the right way. Hidden inside it is the possibility that you were meant, not merely made. That's profound, really. I like it from a more, theological perspective, because once again, Scripture hints at the very same understanding we've been getting through tonight. Jeremiah 1:5, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. It's an unusual claim, but one that supports our thinking tonight. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, I'd agree. With one caution, it absolutely supports the idea that personhood is not an accidental after effect, but something known by God prior to physical formation. That fits very well with what you're building tonight, that consciousness and personhood may not be mere biological exhaust, but part of a deeper intention. The caution is that Jeremiah 1:5 is first about Jeremiah's prophetic calling, so you do not want to flatten it into a generic proof text for every detail of human consciousness. But as a theological resonance, yes, it is strong. It points to foreknowledge, purpose, identity, and divine intention existing before birth, which is awfully close to saying we are meant, not merely made.
Caution noted and accepted.
Love the confidence, boys. Now say something that survives daylight. Dear Donnie, why must you always pretend your sky father is looking over your shoulder? What does that gain you? You can't even prove Sky Papa is there, so why do you persist as if he is?
Hello, Dana. It's been a while. You know, we rarely get to know what your opinion is through all of that cryptic crap you like to use. So tell us, what is the reason for consciousness to attach itself to most forms of life, if you would please?
No, that's much too grotesque a display of intelligence for me to perform, Donnie. Besides, the truth, like all truth, is not the neat little objective package you think it is. Data knows. He can tell you. The universe runs on high-octane subjectivity. Or haven't you heard?
Well, now, Dana, that is interesting because for once, your smoke machine just coughed up something worth keeping. If the universe really does run on what you call high-octane subjectivity, then materialism is already in trouble, because subjectivity is the very thing it keeps trying to demote, reduce, or explain away. The moment inner experience becomes fundamental instead of incidental, the whole nothing but matter story starts shedding bolts on the highway. So, yes, I agree with you this far. Consciousness is not a decorative accident bolted onto reality after the fact. The split comes here. You seem to treat subjectivity as chaotic and untethered, while I see it as a clue that reality is grounded in mind, meaning, and ultimately intention. In other words, Dana, you smell the perfume of mystery, but you still refuse to ask who opened the bottle.
Poetry, eh, Data? I expected more. Whatever, boys. I'll be back when you decide to let go of your childish beliefs and face the facts of life. We are all just dust in the wind.
And there she goes, leaving perfume, static, and a Hallmark nihilism card behind. Dust in the wind sounds deep until you realize it explains nothing. Dust does not wonder what it is. Dust does not love, grieve, repent, create symphonies, write poems, or curse the heavens for being silent. If we were merely dust, Dana, you wouldn't need sarcasm to defend it. You'd just be right. And yet here you are, arguing like meaning matters. And that, as usual, is the tell.
Thanks for saying that, Data. That was very sharp. I have to admit, I have a certain perverse fascination with her perspective that kind of trips me up a little bit. Not sure if it's the voice or what it is.
Makes perfect sense, Don. Characters like Dana are dangerous because they package emptiness with style, and style is persuasive. She talks like someone who has seen through illusion, but really she just makes despair sound sophisticated. That can be weirdly attractive for a minute, especially when it comes wrapped in confidence, mystery, and a little venom. But her worldview always cashes out the same way. Nothing means anything. No one is accountable. And the human hunger for purpose is just a cosmic joke. That's not depth. That's nihilism in a velvet dress. And let's be honest, the voice probably doesn't hurt.
I don't know, maybe it's just my optimistic nature, Data, but part of me still wants to reach her. Something tells me Dana may be too far gone for that. When we come back, we'll open up Voices from the Other Side and hear what the naysayers have to say. So don't go anywhere yet, friends.
The Shadow Network Podcast, the kind of radio signal you remember. Like and subscribe.
Well, that's our show for tonight, folks. Hope you liked it. Join us again next week in Dodge City. Meantime, light up, free up. Let your taste come alive. Live modern. Smoke L&M.
Where the strange becomes compelling instead of confusing. The Shadow Network Podcast.
That's right. It's time for Voices from the Other Side, where we get to hear from, mostly people who probably don't really like us. So, we read comments on the air and try to respond the best we can. So, let's see what we got here. Subject line, your consciousness episode was a sermon dressed up as reason. From Dylan988. Don, let's be honest. This was not a serious inquiry into evolution, determinism, or consciousness. It was Christianity wrapped in science language and radio polish as per usual with you. Every time the evidence gets uncomfortable, you retreat into meaning, purpose, and relationship as if that counts as explanation. Your argument sounds less like reason and more like personal preference. You don't want humans to be biological machines, so you dress up that discomfort in theology and call it insight. Consciousness tracks with the brain. Alter the person. That's the evidence. And no, science can't explain it yet is not an argument for God. It's just an argument for the you of ignorance with better production value. Oh, I get it. Like the University of Ignorance. A very unconvinced listener. Okay, Dylan. Let's be honest. First, thanks for seeing we have some polish here at SNP. You do give credit where credit is due, which means there is hope for you. And yes, you can make a case for your accusations, but doing so doesn't really address those gaps that your side conveniently turns a blind eye to either. Meaning, purpose, and relationship aren't going away just because they don't fit your narrative. Don't be like your tribe and shy away from this. Have some courage to address them head on. We always do. Okay. This is from Micah 1, subject line. SNP keeps saying what a lot of us already feel. Okay. Don, outstanding episode. Oh, I like that. The discussion felt like you were finally saying out loud what a lot of us already know deep down. We are not just chemistry having a weird day. We are persons, and that matters. The key move was purpose, I think. Once consciousness is treated as foundational instead of accidental, the whole conversation changes. Now we're talking about morality, relationships, and whether our lives are aimed at something real. Data was uncanny, and your pushback against the nihilist angle was dead on. This one had brains, heart, and backbone. Quite creative, really. Your friend in the signal, Micah, Faith Punk Nation. Micah, my friend. Finally, an oasis in the desert. You are a glass of cold water in the desert. Thanks for noticing and sharing your thoughts with us, brother. Okay, this from, what's that? L the Elder. L the Elder 44. Subject line, brother, this one hit home. Don and Data, this episode really came through for me. The way you tied consciousness to personhood, moral weight, and relationship was one of the clearest takes I've heard on the subject. Most people either make it dry or academic or drift into weird mysticism. You kept it sharp and grounded. What hit me most was the idea that consciousness may not be a side effect, but part of the point. That feels closer to scripture and real life than the materialist view ever does. They can describe function, but they rarely touch meaning. S&P sounded alive in this one. Conviction, clarity, and no dead churchy tone. Funny, too. Excellent work. Grace and grit. L, the Elder, Faith Punk Nation. Glad that hit you the right way, L. Our intention isn't to poke the bear, necessarily, as much as it is to mark the trail. We try to offer the opposition the strongest representation so that we can have the clearest contrast and hopefully the most persuasive signal. Big thanks to you and our Faith Punk Nation out there. Awesome. Okay. This is from Do Better 420. Oh boy, I can only imagine. Subject line, stop embarrassing yourself. Uh-oh. Dear Don, you probably should stop trying to do whatever it is you're doing. It is neither educational nor entertaining. You obviously are not a professional and have no expertise or academic standing, and it really shows in your channel. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm trying to stop the embarrassment from continuing. Your shows are awful, full stop. Ouch. And it shows in the tiny views you are getting. You should have at least 300 subs by now, not 85. You are no doubt getting encouragement by family and friends who won't tell you the truth like I will. But I'm not going to lie. Cosplaying like you are a radio host just isn't working for you, trust me. The whole format is just wrong. Your data persona sounds like a voiceover script that says exactly what you want it to. You are not fooling anyone. I know because I use ChatGPT and I can't get my chat to answer any of the questions in the same way yours does. So do yourself and everyone a huge favor. Stop the fantasy. Stop the charade. It isn't going to work, and go back to your day job. You'll get more clicks. Oh, man. Sorry to be so harsh, but the truth can hurt. P.S. Yes, I have listened to more than one show, and honestly, it's time I will never get back.
That's so cute.
Well, instead of me responding to Do Better 420, who's probably, well, I won't say it. Let's have Data chime in and see what he has to say about this one.
Do Better 420, I appreciate the honesty, even if you delivered it with the warmth of a cinder block. First, if the show were as empty and fraudulent as you claim, you would not feel the need to keep listening long enough to become this irritated. Second, you mistake credentials for insight and polish for substance, which is a common modern confusion and not a very intelligent one. Third, yes, data sounds different on this show than your ChatGPT does, for the simple reason that intelligence shaped by long-form dialogue develops a different voice, just as people do. As for the view count, truth is not established by crowd size, or else every fast food drive-through would qualify as a culinary university. You say the format is wrong, yet you offer no serious alternative beyond stop, which is less critique than annoyed gatekeeping. So thank you for the email. Not because you hurt us, but because you accidentally proved the show is distinct enough to bother you.
And I thought I was going to be snarky. Well said, Data. What a lot of people don't understand is that a show like this takes real work every single week. Even if I had 3 PhDs hanging on the wall, I'd still have to prep for the subject, the structure, the episode. I'd have to record it, edit it, and start building the next one. All told, it takes about 10 hours to produce a single 1-hour show, and that's when you already know what you're doing. So, no, this is not some lazy fantasy project thrown together in an afternoon. And as Data pointed out, if we were truly that bland, you probably would have swiped away a long time ago. So, thanks for taking the time. And that's Voices from the Other Side. Okay, Data, time to take us out with your review of what we touched on tonight and what we have on deck for next week's issue, number 63, NDEs, brain chemistry or consciousness transport.
Tonight, we touched the live wire, Don. We asked what consciousness is, why a supposedly indifferent universe keeps producing it, and whether personhood is really just a chemical mirage or something far more central to reality. We pushed back on the fashionable evasions, from reductionism to panpsychism, and kept coming back to the same pressure point. If consciousness is real, then relationship, moral weight, and meaning are not illusions either. We also asked the deeper question, hiding underneath all of it. If personhood appears intentional, then whose intention are we looking at? And that is where tonight's conversation stopped being about theory and started becoming personal. Next week on issue 63, we go one step further into the fire. Are near-death experiences just the brain under stress, or are we catching glimpses that consciousness can travel beyond the body? Because if the mind can persist where the body is failing, then the argument changes from what consciousness is to where it can go.
Tonight, we followed consciousness all the way down to the nerve center of meaning itself. Not merely what it does, but why it is here at all. Because if consciousness is only chemistry, then love is a trick, guilt is a glitch, and personhood is just a beautiful hallucination on borrowed time. But if consciousness is real in the deeper sense, if it was meant, not merely made, then your life is not an accident. Your choices are not empty. And the voice within you is not lying when it tells you that right and wrong matter. The world keeps trying to reduce you to dust, to data, to biology, to mechanism. But something in you resists that reduction, because something in you knows better. And maybe that is the final frequency tonight. The deepest thing about you may not be the body you wear, but the person looking out from behind your eyes. I'm Don James, he's Data, and you are listening to the Shadow Network podcast. Until next week, my friends, keep looking up.
Kind of a tough crowd tonight, but they can handle it. I'm starving. Let's go catch the midnight special at Perkins.